Hey everybody, I wanted to extend a heartfelt thank you to the people who watched my recent couple of videos about negative social encounters I've had and people who have tried to manipulate me as a result of me being on the spectrum and that sort of thing. And I wanted to extend a thank you to all of the kind words that I got from everybody because of that. Those are things that have plagued me in the back of my mind for a long time because they've always been in the mindset of, had them in the mindset of like, you better not let anybody know about that, or they'll realize they'll realize what a piece of shit you are and everything, how awful you really are and all of that stuff. And to be able to talk about it and receive a very supportive response, especially in a forum as frequently hostile and toxic as the internet, is very encouraging. And I really appreciate that a lot. I don't think I need to go into like extraordinary detail explaining to you every single such encounter I've had in my life. As you can imagine, there have been plenty. And the great frustration is that so many of them, probably 95 some odd % of them, have to do with negative experiences with women, where the woman in question or someone associated with her, as I expressed in those last two videos, radically misunderstands or misinterprets something that I was trying to do or get across. And I don't want to sound, it's important to me that I not come off like some kind of noble victim or something like that. Like, I've had certainly plenty of situations in my life where I've been the one genuinely at fault and I needed to apologize. And what's so interesting is like the situations where I genuinely need to apologize. If I do sincerely apologize, the situation resolves and goes away. But what I found, the litmus test that I found, is that in the situations where someone's trying to manipulate me, if I apologize, I'll find that if I apologize, the anger and contempt and hostility they're expressing gets worse. And so that's kind of that for me is what I have to keep in mind. If somebody feels wronged by me and I apologize to them and we move on, we move beyond it and move on, that's a healthy resolution of conflict. If I apologize to somebody and they dig their claws in deeper because now they've detected weakness, that's a different thing. And I think that's something that all people on the spectrum need to be aware of, and all people in general. I mean, anybody can be manipulated by toxic people, including other toxic people. And so one of the threads somebody pointed out, they said, as I related these stories, it was easier for them to understand why I had my phase where I went through the whole red pill thing. And yeah, there was a very unfortunate and very embarrassing period in my life over 10 years ago, well, about 10 years ago at this point, where for about a year to 2 years, less than 2 years ultimately, I was really inundated with that stuff. In fact, I would say 1 year was spent with me being really into it, and the next year was spent with me trying to extricate myself from it. And that's a story that people have, in all sincerity, told me to pitch to Netflix as a miniseries. And I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be, I don't want that to be like the defining point in my life. And so I don't want to go into that. But they point out, yeah, you're right, that was a very strong motivating factor. And there was one, I don't know if I want to tell the story or not. It would be a good story. It'd be an entertaining story, certainly an interesting story. I might tell it, I might not. And as I'm contemplating it, I'll probably give in to temptation in the near future and just tell it. But there was a very specific betrayal in my life, betrayal by a very, very close friend of mine, that really put me on that path, really made me finally say, that was like out of all of these god-awful situations with women or people related to women getting pissed off at me and everything, that was finally the straw that broke the camel's back. That was the point at which I said, no more Mr. Nice Guy. And you know, there were other contributing factors at that point. There was my own toxic desire for fame and, you know, fame and fortune at any price, at any cost, you know, and that sort of thing that that contributed to it, and everything. Me having amassed a following in the thousands of people. More is about 10 or 11,000 people at the time. It's only about a little over 8,000 now, but a following in the thousands of people, contributing to the toxic aspect of my ego and everything that kind of fueled all of that at a time when I was very hurt and vulnerable. And, you know, the thing of it is, I heard a description of the difference between heroes and villains one time, I think, that explains it perfectly. This was in a video somebody did describing the fundamental difference between Batman and the Joker, how if you follow the Batman comics or movies or what have you, everything, Batman and the Joker are ultimately like two sides of the same coin. They have more in common with each other than either wants to admit. And that's the idea, of course, you know, the cyclical thing. The Joker kills Batman's parents and Batman pushes the Joker into a vat of chemicals so they create each other, that sort of thing. But this person said, the difference between a hero and a villain is that a hero says, the world has hurt me, so I will work to reduce the amount of pain in the world. And a villain says, the world has hurt me, so I will hurt the world back. And I think that was the mindset I was fundamentally in. The mindset where I finally said, no more Mr. Nice Guy. Fundamentally, that's where I was. And so it's, again, it's a thing of like, yeah, I could tell you some really fascinating, interesting stories. I'm not going to, I have other reasons, other business reasons for not going into that time, rehashing that specific time in my life. But as far as what happened in my life that why I went there and why I got to that point, it would be an interesting story. Again, I don't know if I want to like rehash it and then have people, even positive comments coming in where I'm constantly like thinking back on this time in my life and re-experiencing it and that kind of thing. But, you know, suffice it to say, I thought I wanted, you know, ultimately, I thought I wanted to strike a blow against, you know, I wanted to like take up the mantle of men's issues and strike a blow against feminism and all of that. But ultimately, what I realized was it's one of those things where that whole movement, the red pill movement, it begins with legitimate issues. You know, men's health, men's psychology, legitimate issues, things like the fact that men are more likely to commit suicide, or rather, correction, they're more likely to succeed in attempt suicide and succeed is how it should be understood. The ways that boys get left behind in modern education and that kind of thing, fathers get screwed over in divorce court, and certainly the ever-present specter and controversial specter of false rape accusations. All of these things are legitimate concerns. And the problem, and so on its face, it sounded like, you know, yes, all right, this is something I can champion and strike a blow against, you know, people in my life that have screwed me over, basically, that kind of thing. And then I found out very quickly that, you know, there's a surface level that is about that, but the depth, you know, the surface, the tip of the iceberg, that's the tip of the iceberg. The depth below it is guys that want to bring back but guys that want the Handmaid's Tale. They want Gilead. They want, they just want female, you know, pious female Christian slaves and all of that shit. And once I saw that, and once I saw what it was really about, it ran so contrary to everything I truly believe that I just couldn't do it anymore. And at that point, you know, the damage was done to my reputation, and, you know, it was just a big shit. I realized it was a big shit sandwich, and I was going to have to take a bite if I wanted to get out of it. But anyway, so and also, well, I'm not going to keep going into detail, but that's in summary kind of where my thought process was. I really, like I said though, closing this out, I don't want this to go on too long, but closing it out, I really do appreciate people having a positive and helpful and supportive response to all of that. I feel like if I had addressed those issues better earlier in my life, I would have if I had addressed those things earlier in my life when they happened in a more positive and proactive way, instead of like hiding, trying to hide from this fear of this thing I was afraid I was, and everything, or rather, in a way, it was kind of like I was embracing the thing that everybody was, wanting me to be, if that makes sense. So many people were wanting me to be, and if I hadn't done that, I could have saved myself a lot of trouble. But it's so helpful to hear from to hear from everybody with these positive words. And so that's that's ultimately where it falls. And I had a had a closing observation to all of this that would have been very poignant, but now I'm blanking on what it was. Give me a moment. I don't want to edit this. I'm trying to bring that back. I'm sure it'll come back to me like 5 minutes after I, as soon as I'm about to go to the gym, and as soon as I get there, I'm sure it will all come rushing back to me. Oh yeah, I remember what it was now. See, aren't you glad you stuck around? Anyway, one of the things that was interesting to me when I kind of had made myself and my channel kind of a public face for all that red pill stuff, and people were starting to notice me in that light. One of the first things that happened, or one early thing that happened, was Devin Ferrasi at Badass Digest was at Badass Digest was planning a hit piece on me that I don't think ever fully materialized. But he sent on Twitter, he was openly ordering his writers on Twitter to start digging into my background. And I remember in the tweet he said, look into this guy. He's got to have, quote, he's got to have at least a couple of restraining orders to his name. And that was born, his accusation of that was born out of the fact that I had a number of media targets that I was going after heavily and very regularly at that point. And it was so that was so galling to me that he said, I don't have any restraining orders. I don't have any criminal background whatsoever outside of traffic violations. And so it was very galling to me that he said that. But not long after he said that, he was fired for sexual assault allegations and allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault. He was fired from his job. And it turned out all of this stuff came out about what a scumbag and what a monster he was. And then there was a documentary, he was interviewed for this documentary, a Me Too documentary, where he's talking with like wide-eyed innocence about how these accusations tore his life apart, and what, I'm just trying, he talks about how he was suicidal and he lost his career and he's been trying to rebuild his life and everything like that. And I always I don't know how to get a hold of him, but I've always wanted to ask him, like, do you not see any parallel between that and how you were attacking other people? And don't get me wrong. I mean, I was going after people in my own way too. And it's just that there's this very negative feedback loop that happens in the internet, and you have to be mature enough to step out of it and not get into that cycle of things. And I've just always wanted to ask him that, but it was just amazing to me. It was, you know, uh, this guy is like revealed, at least in accusation, at least at the level of accusation, revealed to be every bit the monster that he's going around accusing other people of. And it's one of those things where, you know, as the saying goes, the guilty dog barks loudest. So, but at the time, I was terrified that his writers were going to go digging into my background and come away, you know, dig up people like that asshole high priest at that occult thing I was a part of for a while. He was gonna dig into that and find out about that, and and publish a one-sided story, you know, based on that and everything. And it's so interesting because people will want to come to me and say, do you realize that, you know, you could have saved yourself all of this trouble if you hadn't done X, Y, and Z? Well, yeah, no shit. Of course I could have. But it's that thing of like, after a point, we have to stop, you know, after a point, we have to kind of like be willing to put aside our righteous indignation and realize that our righteous indignation is only making our lives miserable. It's kind of like I saw, and this, I'll wrap it up after this, but I saw this, this news story, about a news report about this guy that was being harassed on the internet, like cyber harassed by thousands and thousands of trolls and all of this, and it was tearing up his life. And what had he done? I don't, if some of you remember exactly, I don't remember his name, but some of you might remember this incident, this controversy, this gate. It seems like we call everything a gate now. But this guy, this was while Chick-fil-A was actively opposing gay marriage, and this guy came up and drove up to a Chick-fil-A drive-through and started yelling at the poor cash register girl that was, you know, the poor girl at the cash register that was just, you know, trying to take, you know, fill orders, the orders that are coming through. He starts yelling at her and berating her about working for this evil homophobic corporation and everything like that. And his behavior, you know, and it's kind of like he started yelling at her, and he recorded that and put it on the internet. And the reason he was getting cyber harassed was because, you know, he was being cyber harassed by people who were pissed off at him for berating this poor young woman who's just trying to do her fucking job. You know, this is not a person that has any contributing factor, any contributing control in the in the actual politics of what's going on. They're just working they're just working their shitty day job. It would be like throwing tomatoes at the guy who sweeps the floors at the Daily Wire or something, you know. And as I was listening to that, as I was listening to that art or that news piece on TV, I was kept waiting for someone to say, you know, I remember at one point they asked me, they said, like, what message do you want to get out to anybody else who's being cyber bullied right now? And he just weepingly crying says, that you are loved. And I kept waiting for, it's like I'm watching this and I kept waiting for somebody to say, hey man, do you realize that the reason people are pissed off at you is because you yelled and berated this poor woman that was just trying to do her job for things that she had no actual involvement in, and they feel like you were being a bully and an asshole, and all of this could have been avoided if you hadn't done that. I kept waiting for somebody to say that, and no one ever did, you know. And that's the great I think the great contributor to the toxicity online is that you have these things where when people are confronted with the wrongness of their actions, they'll prevaricate in every possible way to try to avoid stopping and thinking, oh shit, you know, I got myself in a bad situation and I need to get out of it, and the best way to get out of it may just be to fall on my sword, figuratively, meaning humble yourself, not don't actually commit seppuku. Anyway, so those are my thoughts. Like I said, a thank you to everybody who wrote in with those kind words. I really do appreciate it, and it helps me on the path to forgiving myself and moving forward in a productive way. So thank you for that.